Welcome, guys, to Any Mum Can podcast and live tonight. I have an amazing guest with me today, Leyla Okhai. She is somebody I've known for some time, and I really admire this lady. She's, I can't say, she's just so kind, giving, and does amazing work in the diversity world. And I have her on with me today because I just feel the things that she talks about in our conversations and how she contributes to our community is second to none, and really, really insightful, and always gets us thinking. So I wanted to bring her on here for you guys to hear the things she has to say. So this is Leyla, and she's the founder and CEO of Diverse Minds, enabling organizations to create mentally healthy and equal workplaces through coaching, training, speaking, and consultancy, with a focus on practical mental health practices and strategies, cultural awareness, and race equality to facilitate positively productive workplaces. So amazing work that you do, Leyla. And today, Leyla wanted to talk about managing boundaries, knowing when to stop, and really working on our perfectionism that women generally feel a large pressure. So over to you, Leyla. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the work you do.
Thank you so much, Versha, for that lovely introduction and saying I'm kind. That's made my day because it's something I strive to be, but I think it's always a work in progress. So yeah, lovely. So my business is Diverse Minds, and I also do one-to-one coaching with women who want to balance their work life. So they want to be the best and progress in their life, however they define that. It could be career, it could be family, it could be both, it could be neither, it could be recovering from surgery. And they also want to look after themselves. So they want to work out on a strategy that works for them, because I don't think that everyone has the same well-being profile, the same well-being signature.
Oh, fantastic. And what took you to this work you do?
Yeah, so I worked in higher education in the UK for a really long time, for 16 years in 3 different institutions. And as much as I did enjoy it, I saw a lot of things that created very toxic environments. So the intense competition, the fact that staff of colour, global majority staff, it's very, very difficult to progress. You might think academia and education is forward thinking, and the research might be, but the workplace practices are quite far behind. The interesting thing is, Versha, I never expected to have my own business. So I always thought I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to chip away. And the idea was for me to become really senior in the higher education space. And then I started doing work on practical mental health, particularly gearing up managers in my job at Imperial College to have conversations about mental health and well-being. And I think being in London, people get wind of it. And we used to have meetings with corporate sector, other universities, and they'd say, oh, wow, you've done so much at Imperial. Will you come and do this for us? So that's how it snowballed. So that's how I got involved in it. And then for me, there was also a really big yawning gap around culture. So people talk about mental health, they talk about recovery, they talk about, this is the counselling, this is what you do, go see your GP. But for me, what was really missing is people's cultural identity and their recovery journey, and even before recovery, how they talk about mental health, mental ill health, and well-being. So that's the sort of 2 bits that come together. It's like a Venn diagram where I really encourage workplaces to think about, and women that I coach, to think about what their cultural heritage gives them and brings them to help them on their recovery journey or what they want to do in their life.
That's fantastic. And do you mind, I'm going to be really naive and ask you, when you say recovery journey, would you mind just expanding a little bit about what you mean by the recovery journey?
Yeah, so I think whenever anyone experiences mental ill health, whether it's long term and they've got a diagnosis, maybe they've grown up having chronic anxiety or depression, or it could be that someone has really been impacted negatively, I think as we all have, during these last 15 months. So whether it's struggling on a day-to-day, whether it's bereavement, anything that anyone's gone through, we are in a particular place where we're not a mental optimum. So I think the important thing is how do people recover? How do they get to the point where they're their mental optimum again? And it doesn't mean that it looks the same every time. So when someone might have a mental health condition that isn't going to go away, they can still have really positive mental well-being by knowing their triggers, knowing their strategies, and that is all part of the recovery journey.
Okay, yeah, and I think it's interesting how you talked about cultural awareness and the other things that make us actually really, really individual, that somehow when we go into a corporate environment, that we become, it's like we all put a white coat on. And I'm hoping, I left corporate some 21 years, no, sorry, not 21, I'm not that old, 11 years ago. And I would like to think things are a lot different. And I think different organizations obviously offer different cultural experiences. But I definitely know that some are not necessarily taking these things on. So it's great that you're championing this so that different cultures, different people from different parts of the world, different parts of society, never mind, just race, but is a wide range of societal differences, isn't there? How does this play into managing boundaries for women, mothers? Many working mothers have a lot on their plate, managing children, the home, and I hate saying that word, managing children, but we're bringing up children, and the priority is their family, but they love their career too, and their career for many women is part of their identity, and so it's a huge part of their life, and so are their children. And where do you draw the line on things, and where do a lot of women are feeling pressure? Where's it started from, this pressure, and working into managing boundaries from there?
Yeah, I think it's very fascinating now, isn't it, about how the trajectory from women entering the workplace in the UK in the late 60s, early 70s to where we are now, where women are obviously a huge part of the workforce, driving economic change, small business, absolutely massive. And I think if you think about the length of time, it's been very short in the grand scheme of things, and it's been incredibly intense. So I think with that has become this thing around, well, if you're going to work, don't think you can dump the other stuff, because, society in the West has gone, well, that's over there as well. I think that's one of the things. I think it's also been a case of, well, if you want equality and you want parity of experience with men who have been in the workplace technically a lot longer in the West, there does seem to be some pressure around, you've got to act a particular way. So I think some of that culture is still looming at large. And I think that's one of the reasons there's a huge amount of pressure on women to be a certain way. I also think it depends on people's parental experience. So some people are adoptive parents, some people are guardians, some people are biological parents, some people are non-biological parents, some people are step parents. And I think all those different types of parenthood have their own different benefits, challenges, and profiles. So I think if I think about your question around managing boundaries, the first thing I would say is to think about your work-life balance, in the sense of it might not be 50-50. So often we think work-life balance is 50-50, it's a scale, but it could be 70-30, that you want to work 70% of your time. It could be you want to spend 60% of your time with your family, and that could be physical time, but it could also, we need to think about the mental space that we're giving that, whatever our time allocation is. So for me, that's one thing. And I think once you've established that, it might seem like pie in the sky, or it might be possible, is to consider, well, how do I then make this a reality? So if I feel like I don't have enough time to do the things I want to, what are the ways in which I could plan the conversation or do things, and it might not be easy, and I realize that they're not easy choices, but to start having these conversations with my manager, with my workplace, work out my finances, what's going to be possible. It might be that I do want to work 70%, but not in the job that I'm in. So is there a way to do a side hustle? yeah, how would that work for me? Could it work for me? And looking at the different options available, and also to be really aware around assertiveness. So assertiveness looks different, I think. In an ideal world, it doesn't, but it can feel very different rather than look different in the workplace to the family place. It can be easier to say no at home, or it could be harder to say no at home. So I think it's also considering where is it more difficult to draw boundaries and what kinds of support might I need to do that, and to not feel that you're on your own.
Absolutely. Gosh, support is a massive part of it. And I think many women don't feel the permission to ask for support. Is that ego, do you think, or societal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's actually quite easy to suffer in silence. I think it feels quite scary to tell people. And I also think, for me anyway, the older you get, the more difficult it can be, because you think everyone's got it together. I'm not 16 anymore. I can't just, maybe text a friend and say, I'm feeling really rubbish. This has happened. Like we used to talk more, didn't we? Back in the day when we didn't have mobile phones. But I think it's actually really tough. I think it's really tough to know who to talk to. I think it's really tough to know how to say it. I think it's really scary to consider how someone may or may not react. And I think maybe for some people it is ego, but for me, I think it's more of those things, and just thinking, if I just suck it up, if I just get to the end of the week, I'll feel better. But often that doesn't happen. And then we just also think people haven't got the time to listen. They're too busy. They don't want to hear my stuff. But yet, if we knew someone was suffering like that, of course we'd want them to talk to us. So I just think there's quite a lot to it. And it's tricky because of that.
And I hear that completely, because I think each and every person, every woman, I'm not sure about men if they entirely think like this, but many conversations I've been having recently are all around these things. I've needed support, and I've probably not reached out as quickly as I could have done, just because I don't want to burden. And then I decided to take the community approach, and this is to support my daughter. And by supporting my daughter, it's supporting me, because then I'm not on my own. And I have decided to be assertive and share and take the community approach in helping a young individual, because one person alone, or not two parents alone, is two people. But I felt almost immediate relief that taking that broader approach and sharing, I didn't overshare. I didn't need to divulge a lot. I just thought, well, yeah, I'm not asking directly help for me, but this person really needs support, and that indirectly supports me, because I don't feel all the pressure is just on my shoulders and my husband's shoulders. So, and I'm fortunate enough to have a really strong bonded family, because not everybody has that. And reminding ourselves, we had a social gathering at the weekend for a celebration, an engagement, and it just reminded me just how close we have a family that actually we're so blessed to be connected with. And how can you not tap into that energy? And it I just think, even if it doesn't help, at least we're trying different ways in showing young generation that you don't have to do things alone. Because I feel the younger generation too are in that place. They don't have the way we were. I'd call on the landline. I'd be on the landline for like 2 hours. I could have spent the whole day with my best friend and then be on the phone for a further an hour and a half on the phone in the evening. Or parents would be like, "What can you be talking about?" I have no idea, but we talk.
Yeah. So true. It's so true. I remember sitting by the phone, or someone's phone's engaged, and I'd be dialing and dialing and dialing until I got through. You don't do that anymore. There is society moves, it shifts, culture changes, but I'm not always sure that everything is completely positive. And I feel like maybe looking back with rose-tinted glasses, but in the 90s growing up, people did have a bit more time for each other, because we weren't distracted by all the pinging and the notifications and the internet all the time. Not that I'm criticizing that, it's just it has a different cultural nuance to it.
Yeah, most definitely. So yes, managing boundaries in that realm is where we I loved the thing you talked about, people being a bit more informative for their workplace, making some choices that might mean changing the work pattern and those things, and asking for support and help. And then how would this, go into knowing when enough is enough?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question, because I think most of us, even when we know all this stuff and we're great at supporting other people, we may not see it in ourselves. So in an ideal world, we would stop and listen to those small signs. So they're going to be slightly different for everyone. But is it chronic upper shoulder pain? Is it headaches? Is it feeling extra exhausted? Is it really lacking motivation? Is it going to the junk food? Is it not eating? Is it not sleeping? Is it, all of our little signs? So listen to those. And then often we don't do that. And we go back to suffer in silence, push through it. And then I think, and Versha, this is, I know, something that you're really, you talk about a lot. There'll be bigger clues. So things will start to shut down potentially, we'll start to become really unwell. Something happens that gives us bigger alarm bells. And I think often that's the point where we start to really take notice and go, sugar, something's really got to change here. And even if those little clues, you can't change things quickly at that time, I would still say, listen to them. What do they say? What can you pull back on? Good is good enough. I'm not a perfectionist, so it's easy for me to do. I'm really not a perfectionist. People think I am, and I find that hilarious. I am all about getting it done. Yeah, good is good enough. Yeah, no, I don't triple check things. I'm the queen of typos. I have people to help me with that because that's not my forte. So I just like getting things done. So it's knowing that if I make everything perfect, what is really going to be the difference here? And maybe sometimes things do have to be perfect. I get that. But sometimes they don't have to be perfect. So I think it's listening to those signs. If you don't listen to those signs, when the big alarm bells come, what will you do to take a step back? What's negotiable? What's in your control? What's not in your control? And how can you communicate that?
Oh, absolutely key. And what is in your control and what's not out of your control is such an important conversation to have continuously, actually, because there's always stuff going on. And that if all of it comes, if you stress about everything that is in your control and not in your control, then right down to the traffic, you might get caught in, like, I know fortunately many people are working from home still. But there's so much that we give away our energy like this, just pass it away. And then we have such little energy left for the things that really count, like yourself, doing things that we can possibly be saying, oh, I don't feel like motivated to do that. I don't feel like doing it. It's just not me to do those things, which are like maybe the way your attitude to health, your mental health practices, how much you move, all these things. And then when the sun is shining, a lot more people are upbeat and ready to be motivated, in inverted commas. But I believe that motivation really should be intrinsic, internally driven, ideally, and this is ideal world. I'm intrinsically driven to always look after my health and do things, but that doesn't mean I don't do things that might sabotage it occasionally when I have some, everybody has down days and I am no different. But it's how far I will swing that way before the internal driver will pull me back, and my sugar sensitivity as well, how it makes me feel, all these factors, right? But when you're internally wired to like, well, I just want to make sure I'm always okay, then that listening is higher. Would you agree?
Definitely. And the guilt as well. The guilt might be reduced. Like, I shouldn't do this. I should be productive. I should do this. So even, as you were saying, I will do that. I will be like, oh, this is terrible. I'm, reading this book, but I'm like, wait a second. I'm learning things. I'm relaxing. I'm going to be much more productive. I absolutely need to do this. So yeah, my challenge isn't perfectionism. It's just constantly, I must get things done. I can be very beholden to my to-do list. So so it's knowing what your triggers are, and then thinking about, well, if I keep doing this, I'm going to be exhausted, and like you said, I won't have time for things. I think something else that I've really learned during this last 15 months of the pandemic is I love to plan. I would always have a calendar booked, packed with work, with social things, and having the social element taken away, it's given me time to go, you know what, I don't have to plan things. I can be more spontaneous. It's not natural to me. It makes me feel a little bit overwhelmed, thinking I haven't got everything planned. But that is definitely a lesson I've learned, and to reframe things. So if I'm stuck in traffic, I'll be like, okay, what audiobook can I put on? What music can I listen to that gives me that little bit more time? And I think I wasn't like that. I wasn't as open to that, but I think being in this situation has pushed me and made me do that. So I'm not one for there's always opportunity in the gloom, but I have been able to practice some of that in the last 15 months.
Yeah, I think some people have maybe experienced the overwork, because what else is there to do? I think some people have that view, or I've got more time, the kids are in bed, I'll just do some work. And so then it comes back to managing boundaries, because there is no balance, or lack of balance, not no balance, but it's the pendulum swinging. And I've noticed it personally. I was working a lot more hours. And when you're self-employed, you feel almost the obligation to, right? And my hand has been forced, because I have been supporting my daughter through a difficult time. And also not doing evening classes and things. I just think, well, I need to make that. It was a really important thing for me, because actually I got to see the way things were at home, and really change the dynamics of our home. And that was, again, coming back to me actually realizing I needed to manage my boundaries of this is what works for my family and works for me, and I feel a better human being for doing this, aside of what my business is telling me I should be doing. Well, I should be dictating what my business is going to how my business is going to operate, and how I'm going to make a difference to people's lives. And that's the whole point of being self-employed, that I can make those decisions, that my business is not going to run me and dictate how my family life is going to be. And that took a lot of thinking about, bravery to do it. But yeah, I don't regret it at all. So I feel so much better for it. But then, yeah, the creeping in of the hours, late nights, and then I've just had to say, no, I'm not doing that. And so it's a fantastic topic, because I actually really had to have this same conversation with myself and realize, yeah, good is good enough, and I've got the rest of my life.
And often I think something else special that can be really helpful, and for some people this will be the case, but I would say for the majority of us it isn't, is to say to yourself, am I the ambulance service for my emails? Someone said that to me when I was in a really tough time, when I had a proper job. And I thought, yeah, you're right, I'm not. So why on earth are you constantly answering emails? And the more you do it, you don't have boundaries, the more people email you. Now, I also appreciate some people will finish work at 3, they'll spend 4, 5, 6 hours with their families, and then they may, out of choice, want to pick up those emails. I think that's very different. And if you have on your signature, I respond to emails out of core work hours, but there is no expectation for you to do so. I get that. But it's when we, again, feel beholden, we feel pressured, we feel we must, that's dangerous. Now, I also know that, corporate lawyers, corporate law firms, they are beholden in a way, advertising agencies, because it's all client facing. So the system has to change. I think there's individual responsibilities, but I also think the system has to change. Like, the system has to be changing with childcare, with costs, with the role of parenthood, what parents do, And so we have a responsibility to look after ourselves, but we also have a responsibility to think about what are the ways in which we can change the system for the benefit of everyone and the good of society as a whole, whether that's writing to your MP, whether that's saying, okay, I'm going to raise something in my team meeting, whether that's, yes, I don't know, joining a lobby group, whatever it is that works. There's two sides to the coin.
Yeah, no, taking action sounds, you can manage your own space, but if you really want to make the biggest difference for it to be continued and spread across work culture, we need to make these ripples so that everybody can benefit, and it isn't us individual people trying to fight against the hierarchy, the leadership, the institutions. So it's really valid. Thank you for bringing those things to the table, Leyla. Really insightful things for people to really think about and take some action on to manage well-being and make time for yourselves so that you can create more enriched lives. So it's not all work. And it's great. There's a thing that this word work is, you don't have to see it as work. I think it's a reframe again, that even if you love and adore what you do, and I do, but it's still taken me, for me as a mother, it's still taking me away from the balance of doing things with my children. So this is the only thing I do on an evening. I may do one other thing occasionally on an evening. And that's just because I'm trying to balance out the other things I've spent many evenings working. And the family just benefit from that. And that's part of it's probably guilt. But I'm very conscious the children are going to be so very little for such a short amount of time. And they're my legacy. I want to have an imprint in their life in a positive way. And the small things are things that count, like colouring with my 10-year-old before he goes off and reads and gets into bed. I talked about last week, we were talking about the Tibetan bowl I've got, doing these things, putting mantras on, singing some mantras with my 10-year-old while he wants me to, because that's not going to be for very long. I mean, my 15-year-old is definitely not really that keen, but she did do all those things when she was much younger, and I'm really pleased and blessed that she was open to it, and she's on her own journey now of change and teenage years. But that's, for me, managing boundaries for me is what that brings, that enrichment. What does managing boundaries for you mean?
I think part of it for me is about letting go of that control, and it's thinking about how do I also, in order to manage boundaries, I need to understand the other people, the person, or the organization. So what are the open questions I can ask to help me understand, and then reach a place where we can agree either to disagree, or that I get some of what I need and they get some of what they need as well. I have to say, I find managing boundaries much easier in a professional workspace than I do in the family space. For me, the family space is really difficult. I think it's great that you were saying about your family is really close and supportive. I think many of us don't have that experience, and so it's really tricky, and that's where I think support networks they're not even more important, but they just might look different, and that's okay. I think the other thing about this is one of the reasons I think some of you might have seen, I've put that I'm child free, but of course I actually really love children, but I'm very happily child free, because for me families don't really work, and I wanted to draw a line under that. So I suppose in a way that's setting the ultimate boundary, isn't it? But I love my friends' kids. I love spending time with people's children. It's not that I don't like children at all. So I think for me about boundaries is always thinking about, what do I have control of? What's going to be a positive possible outcome? What can leave me not feeling enraged and willing to compromise on? And like you said, you don't go into running your own business to work 24/7. We're not unrealistic. We know that there are going to be periods of time like that, but it's not to just graft and feel exhausted. It's about the whole package of why you're doing it. So it's to make a difference, it's to give yourself some freedom, and it's also about being a role model for not just your business but the people that you work with, so really living those authentic values that you set yourself.
Yeah, fantastically put. So well worded. I love the way you put things, Leyla. Thank you, and thank you for your time. I want to honour you for coming on and discussing this really important topic and sharing nuggets to make a difference to mums out there, women out there, managing so much all at the same time, especially during this last 15 months, working from home with children and one seeking still perfection in every element of their life. And it's time for those that may be struggling with perfectionism to hold their hands up and say, okay, where can I start here? And start one step at a time, creating some boundaries and also recognizing when you're feeling like you're being the perfection mindset. And some things may need perfection, as you said, but some things definitely could be, it's good. Typos are good. And there's fantastic software out there. Plug for Grammarly, although American spelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so thank you, Leyla, for coming on and sharing those things. A little different to what we've talked about on previous podcasts, which is I really welcome this because it's different to the thing talking about what we're eating, how we're moving, because mental health, and we've talked at length when we've talked to Rockstar Mums of the Month about how they manage their mental health and their practices. So this nicely leads me into asking you, Leyla, some personal questions. What, if you do you have any daily practices that help you with your mindset and maintaining and managing all with this perspective you have about managing boundaries, good is good enough, etc.?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things is when I've listened to a lot of music. So Versha, and people always laugh because I don't know what they expect, but I absolutely adore drum and bass. So there will never be a day that goes by, especially in the last couple of years, where I don't put drum and bass on and it lifts me. I love going for walks, even if it's a short walk, to get perspective and just walk away from things. Reading is just a complete tonic for me. And I actually, what's interesting is I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, a lot of books on anti-racism, and that really helps me. It doesn't make it worse, it makes it better because it helps me understand different perspectives, different approaches. And I do daily yoga practice, even if it's 5 minutes. I have like an online subscription, and I will always do something before bedtime. And I have to say, it's often these little things that we think are little, when we stop doing them, that it hits us that there's a big gap. So it's to keep it up, and even on, as you said, when you have low days, to do them. So I have a kind of a suite of things, and you won't be very happy to hear this, but I love my tea. So I always have tea. I have herbal tea, I have green tea, the tea is always on in some way. So yeah, and that really helps me too.
No, why would I say not
tea? Caffeine.
No, I'm not. No, I have caffeine. But and there's a tea actually I want to try. I think it's an Argentinian maca tea. And it's quite bitter, but I have heard that if you don't put it in extremely hot water, extremely boiling water, then it's less bitter. So I'm going to. Have you tried it?
I don't think I have. I've had mate. I don't think I've had maca tea.
No, I think it actually. You know what? It is mate.
Is it mate? Yeah, I've had mate. Yeah, it's South, and I think it's they drink it in many countries in South America, don't they?
And they actually walk around with it in their flasks, and it actually blunts blood sugar, and they don't know that because they just drink it because it's cultural.
Yeah.
But it manages glucose levels, which is one of the side effects. There is caffeine in it, but anyway, that's just a side note. But yeah, I'm definitely going to try some because I quite like bitter things. I'm a gin and tonic girl, but not quite espresso.
Yeah, so again, you see, that's a really interesting example about culture. So what from cultural practices is healing, and what can you use? And every culture has many things. Most cultures do. And yeah, I drink a lot of raspberry leaf tea to help with. It really helps me with my hormone regulation and cycles. And again, might work for some people. I know you're meant to drink it before pregnancy, but I just drink it a cup every day, and I find it really, really helps me manage mood swings and imbalances. So yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing them. And any particular mantras you might use?
So I read Marie Forleo, so people might know her. She's a very big business superstar, and she has a book called Everything's Figure Outable. And I read it in January, not with a huge amount of expectation, but I absolutely loved it. So I have been using that, Everything's Figure Outable, when I feel stuck, and it's really helped me. And also a book from Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which again is
Oh, yeah.
quite an old
Yes.
book.
It's
It's
brilliant,
adorable.
though. It's
But the whole
very,
thing,
very good.
I can handle it. So if I think about the worst thing that happens, it's not to say that it's going to be easy and it's going to be a walk in the park, but I'll find a way to handle it. And I also tell myself, things will happen in the time that they're meant to happen. I have to remind myself of that one.
Yeah,
So
that's
they're my three, I think.
fantastic. Really good. And I will definitely be asking about the Mario Folio book. So,
It's really good.
yeah, I wouldn't have expected to. Well, I do like her. She's super glamorous, though.
She talks about that in the book, actually. Yeah, yeah.
Well, fantastic. And they are obviously self-love practices, although a lot of people may not name them that, but they are things that help center you, reset you for the day, and reset you for your life, because every day is life, every moment is life. And that's another thing. My husband has been saying, this is life. Just remember, this is just life, and just that remembering that, sometimes we feel overwhelmed. Sometimes we do have to do more than we plan to, or things don't go well the way we want things to go. And that's just life. And we're learning all the time. And it helps manage how you feel, where your emotions go, which dictate our actions, our appetite for things, lack of appetite for food, how we show up with our friends and family or don't because we withdraw, all of that. Mental health is so, so important. And that's what this podcast today is all about, with not actually directly said that, but it is about you looking after your well-being and your mental health, finding ways to feel important, that you don't need to feel that you're neglecting your mental health because other things are dictating it. So any parting thoughts, Leyla?
Just you saying that, it's another, people will have heard it, I'm sure, but you can't drink from an empty cup. And before we started broadcasting, I showed Versha I have a quote board, and some colleagues that have worked with me will notice it, because I used to have it on my board when I had a desk in my higher education office. But one of the quotes I love is by the wonderful Audre Lorde, who's a Black civil rights activist, and she says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." Because for many of us, we weren't meant to survive, we're not meant to be here. Societal practices are stacked against certain individuals. So I think it's super important to remember that it's an act of political warfare. It's not self-indulgence, or if you want to tame it down, however you want to rephrase that for you, but it works for me.
Yeah, very well put. I won't be able to requote that.
But if you look up Audre Lorde, you'll find it's one of her very, very famous quotes.
And it is so true, because the odds are stacked against many people in society, and it's a gift to ourselves to be able to look after ourselves as well as others. And you can't look after others unless you're actually looking after yourself. And your organization you work for, whether it's yourself or an organization, you can't give your best to them if you are not, looking after yourself. And you can only just look at sickness statistics that are showing more and more people are going off ill from mental health, somewhere or another condition. So I'm going to leave it there. So thank you for your time. You have been wonderful guests with me tonight. And thank you, listeners, for listening. And I will see you all next week. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Bersha.